You won't take nobody when you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nobody, and welcome to the 16th annual Homelessness Marathon. This is the night when we talk about homelessness and we talk about the trials and tribulations that homeless people face. We talk about what we're going to do in America to address this problem. We're going to talk about a lot of things, and usually what we talk about on this show, you don't hear talked about anyplace else. For all the homeless people who have died prematurely from disease, died from freezing to death, died from being beaten to death, from attacks from people who attack homeless people. Don't ask me why. Many kinds of things affect homeless people that don't affect the rest of us. So I'm going to light this candle in their honor. And it's really important, too, because we want to remember that homelessness is not just a political issue. Homelessness, unlike a lot of other issues, which may be important, homelessness is a matter of life and death for the people who are homeless. And that's the number one thing that we have to remember, both as individuals and as a nation. We're talking about people's lives here. Having a hard time lighting this candle, folks, but that's okay. Now, I want to tell you one thing before we get into it. Like any issue, it's controversial. There's a lot of differences of opinion about what we should do about homelessness. Well, that's fine. And frankly, as in any other field, there's a lot of people who, I personally disagree with. Some people I think might even be unscrupulous. Just because you work with homelessness doesn't make you a saint. But by and large, this is one field where the people who we disagree with are dedicated and good people. We can talk about honorable people can disagree. This is a field, well, I like to say, if you're president of the United States, you deal with some of the worst people in the world on a regular basis. But if you're working in the field of homelessness, you're dealing with some of the best people in the world on a regular basis. We all agree, we'll have discussions, we'll talk about a lot of things, but I think that's really an important thing to remember. When you're in this field, you're dealing with people who give of their time, give of their strength, and give of their love and caring to try to help out. And, of course, the homeless people themselves are a diverse group, but the more I know them, the more I personally like them. And here are the people I am going to be talking to in this first hour. We are outside the First Baptist Church of Brattleboro, Vermont. We're in a small town, an idyllic town, a town of like 12,000 people. It's the kind of place people dream of retiring to and having the good life in small town America. But just the same, even in this idyllic small town, you have people in the homeless shelter. You have people here in the church sleeping on the floor. This is the official overflow shelter, it's called, for Brattleboro. We'll get into that a little more, just what that means. So the point of that is that there is no place in America that is not touched by this epidemic of homelessness and the growing poverty in this country. And Brattleboro is no exception, despite the fact that people here are wonderful. They've been wonderful to this broadcast, and despite the fact that it's cold and it's not a place where you really want to be at the mercy of the elements. To my left immediately is Nick. Nick is one of the people who will be sleeping tonight in this shelter. To Nick's left is Morning Star, who is another person who will be staying here overnight. To Morning Star's left is Lucy Fortier, who runs the Brattleboro Drop-In Center. And this overflow shelter is actually, in conjunction with the church, it's the Drop-In Center which runs the overflow shelter in conjunction with the church. And Lucy can tell us about some of the issues that they've faced. And to Lucy's left is a gentleman who goes by the name of Trouble. I don't actually know why, because he seems like a pretty nice guy. But be that as it may. So let's go around the table and let's just talk to people here. And by the way, this is a call-in show, folks. So if you want to call in, we have two numbers to call in. One is 877-NOBODY, the word nobody and the number 8. And the other number, if you're homeless, formerly homeless, or afraid you're about to be homeless, you can also call 866-LEFT-OUT, and we'll be happy to have you join the conversation. Nick, Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you wind up here? Did you lose your trust fund? Did you dissipate your fortune that you had? What happened to your yacht?
My name's Nick. I'm 32 years old. I've actually been battling issues with drug and alcohol addiction for a long time, and I actually came here out of rehab to try to get my life back together, and I'm actually doing really good right now. But I've been here off and on for about 2 months now. I was really glad to have a place to be able to come to. And there was nowhere else to go, you know.
Did you start out? Well, let me ask you this, Nick. Where do you come from?
Actually, most recently I was in St. Johnsbury.
In Vermont.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Actually, I lived all over the East Coast and part of the Midwest.
Do you now? There are a lot of stereotypes about homeless people. I like to say even the ones who fit the stereotypes don't fit the stereotypes really when you get to know them. But we don't. On this show, we don't select homeless people to fit the stereotype or not. We talk to who's here, and we're happy to do so. So you're saying forthrightly that your homelessness has something to do with your substance abuse issues.
Yeah, I've had issues with it for a long time, but I mean, I worked for almost 12 years as a carpenter in the
Really?
construction business, and at
And
one
you were
point,
housed. You were
yeah,
housed.
yeah, at
And
one
you were
point
able
in
to
my
pay your
life.
way in society.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
nobody should think that you're somebody who could never be housed or anything like that, right?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. To your left, Morning Star. How did you come to be gracing this booth and to be giving your presence to the First Baptist Church here?
Um, my mother and father lit. I'm not hearing my mother. It just.
Yeah, go ahead and speak. Your mic, the mic is good. Your headphone may not be up.
I came back to Brattleboro because my family's here. I have been what I call a transient music teacher for 20 years. When I first left where I raised my son, which is Nantucket Island, in 1995, when my son went to college, I went to Nashville so that I could learn the music business. And when I was in Nashville, it hit me like a ton of bricks as a person that had loved music her whole life, that I was watching a landscape that was being stripped of music and arts. If you were under a certain amount of money, it was a time in my life that I decided to dedicate to people that needed music. So I've taught in 32 states. I've worked with people. Basically, my focus is rhythm and pitch to help them learn to focus and learn to hear again and to empower people to use their voices.
Do you play an instrument?
Yes, I do. I play guitar and piano, and I'm a yodeler, and I like to teach yodeling particularly. I find it gives people a lot of something to be happy about.
Well, you learn something every day on this show. I'll tell you, I've never sat in the booth with a yodeler before. I've wished I could yodel, but don't give me a lesson now.
We're not going there.
Yeah, but no, I think that's a good thing. And when you give these lessons, do you make money doing this? Have you made more? Do you do this as a volunteer?
I have to say that this is another interesting aspect of having been out and about in the United States for as long as I have. There's been a definite shift in the landscape. Up until 5 years ago, I was able to earn a good living. Now, for me, a good living coming off of Nantucket, where we had to make 100,000 a year just to survive because of our taxes, etc. To me, a good living became 4 to 7,000 a year. I was living very comfortably on. But remember, a music teacher in the capacity that I was teaching, from town to town, I was actually taken care of by families and people. They'd bring me gas, water, food, because it became so valuable and clear to them as their children were growing what they were missing without music.
Well, there's a lot of lifestyles that we don't honor in America. I'm Jewish, and I know that in the old country in Eastern Europe, you used to have traveling Talmudic teachers and things, and they would be received and welcomed in towns and on a transient basis. But that kind of transient lifestyle, we don't really do it anymore much. I mean, people do, but it's not like the mainstream idea anymore, and it's a good thing. But when did you actually become homeless per se? I mean,
Yes, 1995.
And you lived with people all that time. Most of the time since then, you were taken in by people as you gave lessons.
Um, very often I would, yes, but I never stayed anywhere longer than a couple of months.
Uh huh.
And then I lived in a van for quite a while. And different places, I lived in a gold mining community up in the Sierra Nevadas. And I taught their children, a survivalist community. And they put me in a little old trailer. Took very good care of me, though. And this is what struck me and what I would like to make a point about. Um, First of all, I would like to say that I think we do need to redefine homelessness, that it's an old image pops into people's mind of someone who is helpless and has never contributed to society.
Right.
My experience has been that the homeless people I've met are resourceful, creative, stoic,
Survivors.
tenacious, in a word, survivors, friendly, realizing that if we don't look out for one another, that we don't have a chance. And can't help but thinking, since I was part of such an elite community in Nantucket, an extremely wealthy person and community, that how much richer our people under a certain income are who've struggled this way in our country, how rich they are in friendship and resources.
Well, I have to agree with you. I have to say, I've been doing this now a long time, and I'm comfortable talking to a lot of different kinds of people, and I feel my life is richer because I'm not stuck with just, I don't know who I'd be stuck with, but whatever it would be if I was a lawyer or something, talking to a lot of lawyers. Nothing against lawyers. We can have that discussion another time. But I'm just saying it's nice to be able to be with all kinds of people. And I think that's something that we as Americans should strive is to honor everybody, of course. Lucy, tell us, how did this come to be, this shelter? How long have you been involved with this work?
Um, the shelter came about 7 years ago. After Burlington had quite a few people freeze to death, Melinda Busno, who was the previous director, spoke to various organizations in town. Morningside Shelter got on board along with us, and then we started approaching churches to see if we could use their fellowship hall to start this overflow shelter. And the Baptist church was the only church who would allow us to do that. Their congregation got behind them and said, "Yes, you can do this." There are certain things that we pay for our own way here. We don't leave it up to the church themselves. We pay a portion of the fuel during the winter months. We buy all our paper good, our coffee supplies. A lot of things come in here along with the meals every evening that's organized by our Interfaith Clergy Association.
Well, I think the people associated with this church are quite remarkable, and we'll talk about that a little because there's a story here that people probably don't know, which we'll talk about. But I think the point you make is one that's very important. This started because people were freezing to death.
Correct. And I can say that we have never had anybody freeze to death in Brattleboro. We do not turn anybody away. People come in inebriated. As long as they can take care of themselves, we will give them a meal and a bed to sleep on. And the next morning, we will talk to them to see if there's anything that we can help them with. A lot of times they say, "Yes, I need help." Other times they just walk away and say, "I'll see you another time."
Right. Well, as is their right to do.
Right.
Now, it's not exactly a bed. People sleep on a bedroll kind of on the floor. I've slept in this shelter, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and we'll come back. But let me move on to you, Trouble. Now, obviously, Trouble, the first question I've got for you is, why are you called Trouble?
Well, we go back a long time ago. A kid gave me that name, and I said I would always keep it. And I was a drinker. I quit drinking in 2006. I went to prison.
May we ask why you went to prison?
Third DWI, won't take probation.
Okay.
But to get back to this homeless thing, around here, a reek, a motel, if you don't have a job that's paying about $500 a week, you cannot survive. Because a motel room is $230 to $250 a week. Your food is about $100 a week. That without any clothes or anything.
Right. I know that Brattleboro is an expensive town. You would think we're kind of in the boonies, no offense. I live in a more rural area than this. Somebody pointed to a building that's being refurbished and said they've got a subsidized apartment in that building, and the subsidized apartment is $900 a month.
Yeah, how
How are you
can
supposed to do that?
Vermont lost all the jobs? Probably all I can think of right now is CNS and Philplex and Specialty Board. It's a
Mm-hmm.
paper company.
Yeah.
Now you got these jobs that paying only $8.45, $8.50 an hour.
And you're an example, though, of somebody you've sobered up.
Yes, I have.
And so, okay, you lost your housing, but you've sobered up, but it's even sober. It's not so easy to get back into housing.
No, it ain't.
Yeah, well, good for you, by the
But
way, for getting yourself together.
but you got to look at people like Lucy that run this place. She cares for the people, and she does everything to keep the drop-in going. She would come up, smile, and talk to you. These people need it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, though Lucy knows what I think of her. I told her I was. I told Lucy wasn't sure I wanted her on the show because people would think I was just using pretty women to get sympathy for the cause. Anyway, we've got a caller. So now that we've all been introduced, we got John from Connecticut. Are you still there, John? Is John from Connecticut there?
Yes.
John.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. We got John. Welcome to the Homelessness Marathon, John.
Thank you. My pleasure to be on the air with you.
Well, we're happy to have you. What's on your mind, John?
Well, I just want to let people know, to see someone who's homeless. I'm homeless.
Oh, thank you then for calling in, especially.
Yeah, and well, not all the time. Let me explain it to you. I'm a part-time, part-Armenian, 55-year-old man who, very, very extremely talented man. He was selling most of his life.
Your phone is breaking up, John. Did you say you're 55 years old?
Yes, yes, businessman. Businessman and very extremely talented man in all respects of business. And how does someone like me become homeless? Well, when you can't even make $150 a week because there isn't a business in Connecticut that can afford to pay you that, and they're trying to do everything themselves just to stay afloat. People say, "Oh, come on, there's work out there." There's not work out there. There isn't any work out there. I've built bridges. I've built high rises. I've owned businesses. Very successful man. I wind up in my car sometimes. I wind up in my van sometimes.
Right. Right.
People. I've had family members come to me and say, "What happened to you?" And I tell you what, I want to just haul off and give them a slap. What happened to me? And where does the alcohol and drugs come in? You know what? Am I an alcoholic? Am I a drug addict? No. Can I be? Yes, real easy. Because I tell you what, there's been many nights I'll drink a fifth of vodka, just swallow it down, just so it numbs the pain, and I fall asleep in the van. You know what I mean?
But you're saying you were not an alcoholic before you became homeless, but sometimes you use alcohol to kind of medicate your blues away. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Exactly. I don't have to drink. I don't even like to drink. But there's some nights where if I don't down a half a pint, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep because of all the worry, that constant worry that goes through your entire body, and it pretty much takes a toll on you mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Yeah.
You know what? Do I drink every day? No, but sometimes I'll drink just so I can forget and go to sleep. And like I said, when those two planes hit the World Trade Center, I was a successful businessman. I was married at the time, and I wound up divorced over business like that. And I remember saying to my ex-wife at the time, who was in the office with me, I said, "Business as we know it is over," because I'm a very intuitive man. And she said, "You're crazy." I said, "Okay, watch." Within 2 years, I was dumping so much money in that business to the point where it just wiped out everything I owned. Wound up divorced, wound up bebopping around from apartment to apartment to apartment to apartment. The economy got worse and worse and worse.
I hear you.
Now
Can I ask you one question, John? Because I know people will want to know this. How come you don't have family that'll take you in? Why won't anybody take you in? Do you have no one?
That's a very good question. I have a very large family, and I tell them all the time. I said, you know what? I'm extremely disappointed because I'm the type of guy. I always own beautiful homes. I took everybody in. Here, there's a refrigerator. Eat. Don't worry about it. There's a bed for you. Sleep. They'll say, well, we have our own problem, or our husbands like their privacy, and they'll come and they'll cry and say, oh, I can't stand watching like this, killing me, and I'll never comment on how I feel about it, and I'll say, well, you know what, you got a gorgeous house. The ones that I helped you fix up because your husbands don't do nothing for you, you know what? But you got five empty rooms and an empty, beautiful family room in the basement. But you're crying for me. But I won't say that to them because I got a beautiful heart and I don't want to hurt nobody.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying to you?
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, hang on 1 second, John. Hang on.
That's a question. Yep.
Yeah, it is a question people want to ask, but sometimes people have some family. Sometimes they burn them out, and sometimes their family are just not with it, to put it mildly.
Well, no, they're still living in a fantasy world, you see, because it hasn't hit them yet. But I see signs of where it's starting to hit them, and I don't wish bad on them because I'm not a
right.
retaliating person or vengeful person.
I hear you.
But I'm seeing their lives slowly but surely becoming more and more difficult.
Everybody in America. Hang on, John. Hang on a second. Lucy, while we got John on the phone, have you ever had anybody here? I mean, you may not know everybody's story, of course, but have you ever had people in the overnight shelter who had been successful people who had money at one time and have wound up in the shelter?
Quite a few. As a matter of fact, a couple years ago, we had a mother who had her doctorate degree, and she ended up homeless with her child because of breast cancer. She all of a sudden got dropped after her treatments were finished by her insurance company. And in order to continue her treatment, she had to use up everything she had. But she had a PhD, and she ended up here at the shelter.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people. The number one thing, America, the number one thing homeless people say on this show is, I never thought it would happen to me.
That's true. That's very true.
Let me say this to you,
Yeah.
and all your listeners out there should hear this very loud and clear. This is not a wishing bad on them because I'm angry at my life. I'm actually comfortable with the way things are now. I've accepted it. First it's denial, then it's anger, then you hit the acceptance stage. And once you hit the acceptance stage, you say, this is what I got, and I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to tell you the truth. I've probably never been so happy in my life. I don't know. You probably can't understand that if you want to explain why. But you know what? I much rather sleep in my van and give my child $300 a month when I have it, so she can go to. She has a job, but she's in college, and you know what? At least I can hold my head up high and say, I do for my kids. Okay? Because it gets to the point I don't care about me anymore. I'll always survive. I grew up in Little Italy, and you know what? I'm a survivor. I will survive. I will eat. Okay, I will make it. I'll always have a couple of bucks. Not enough to support myself anymore, to the point where I know I'm always going to have a stable home to live in. I will not. As far as I see in the future, it's out. Forget it. America is done. It is finished. Okay, and it's all smoke and mirrors right now. But when the mirrors crack and the smoke dies down, our government's going to have no choice but to say we're in trouble. Okay?
Well, John, I'm going to thank you for the call, and because we got to move on. But you've said some important things, and you've had people in this booth nodding their heads up and down like bobblehead dolls because they agree with you so much. So I want to thank you very, very much for contributing to this broadcast. And I think John has said a lot of important things. Now, Morningstar, you can identify. I saw you when you went to the point where you were nodding your head up and down. He says he's happier now. Are you here to say that
Yes.
you can be happy without a lot of money?
Yes, I would say, well, I'm crippled. I'm handicapped. I was raised in a hospital. I was encouraged all my life to work. My father kept saying, you don't want to be a burden on anyone. I stopped being able to work. I was a line cook. 30 years ago, I couldn't work the line anymore. I have been denied disability after working for 25 years.
Now, I've seen you,
so it's very
and you
interesting.
can't walk very well.
No, I can't, and I can't really do anything for a sustained amount of time. But there's there's a tendency to, I think, decide that people that aren't causing trouble or aren't in trouble and have been able to do okay will somehow do all right. And that it seems as if the extra monies and care in our country are now going for what are viewed as problem people. And that is something that I think is creating a problem and creating this kind of MO, if you will, that people, what I pick up on, and not in Brattleboro, but in other states and cities, is that people are definitely afraid of the homeless.
Yeah.
There's the idea that you've lost so much you have nothing to lose, so you're like a loose cannon. And that goes to me answering directly your question. Yes, I'm somewhat relieved after a lifetime of being told I'm not doing enough and working. I mean, I worked hard and built a multi-million-dollar construction business with my husband.
Really?
But because of the nature of what went on and how much money was involved and the lawyers, I ended up signing things over for my son. But now my son's values are the values of this world that has decided that there are a certain percentage of people that aren't human beings. And so that's the last thing I'd like to say. I think we also need a new definition of racism in this country. I believe that racism can now be defined as an ability to see another human being as the other or the enemy or someone that's threatening instead of as our brother or sister. I think this is creating a devastating climate in our country now.
I think, wow, well, I don't know. I'm happy to hear some of the things that are being said. And folks out there, I don't tell people what to say. But, you know, it's interesting when you talk to people. By the way, we're out here outdoors. We're outdoors here outside of the First Baptist Church on a cold night when it's been snowing because we want to drive home the point. There are people outdoors on a night like this.
Yes.
And thank goodness that the church and people like Lucy give a place so people don't freeze to death. But not every community is so lucky. People freeze to death all over this country, and that's one of the things we want to draw attention to. You'll hear traffic go by and whatever else. Those phone numbers again are 877-NOBODY-8. Anybody can call that. 877, the word nobody, and the number 8. Or if you're homeless, afraid you're about to be homeless or formerly homeless, you can also call 866-LEFT-OUT. Nick, do you identify with that, what John was saying about, now you may have a different life story, but he says sometimes he has to drink, he feels, just because his life as a homeless person is so difficult in the various stresses that he faces. Does that make it harder to sober up when you are on the streets?
Well, you know, being in this situation, I think one of the hardest things is feeling all alone because, you know, there's a lot of people you really miss in your family and stuff. My family lives a long ways away. I do have some family in Vermont, but they're quite a ways away too, actually. But I've come to the point in my life that I realized that, you know, alcohol and drugs don't help a damn thing. All they do is make things worse. If you can't learn to deal with pain and emotions, then you can't survive. That's
That may be true, but at the same time, there goes a snowplow. Can you understand why people at least try it as a way of escaping their difficulties?
Absolutely, it's a very quick fix for things.
Yeah.
But it doesn't last.
No, I'm the adult child of an alcoholic. I've seen it too up close and too personal. So, you know, it's not a good thing to be dependent on alcohol. But, you know, I mean, realistically, a lot of people on the streets, what else have they got? They're not going to go to, they can't even afford to go to a movie. They don't have a TV. They don't have anything. But you can get a pint somewhere. And I'm not condoning it, but it's not a question of my value judgment. It's a question of understanding what's really going on. That's all. Trouble, what do you think? Now, was it hard to sober up when you were homeless? Is that an especial problem?
I wasn't homeless when I gave up drinking. I was in prison.
Oh, okay. That made it a little easier. You mean they didn't serve you mixed drinks every night in the clink?
I would tell you, I was in prison. If you want something, you can get.
Really?
Yes, it is.
Because they make the hooch right there in the cell.
Bread, apples, milk. They make hooch.
So you actually did have temptations that you resisted, even in prison.
Yes, you got them right in prison.
You know, that just points up something. I once had a guy on the show. I learn on this show. And I had a guy on the show, and we were talking about people say don't give to panhandlers, which I disagree with. I say go ahead. And he said I was an addict. And I said, well, people will say don't give to you because you might be an addict. He said, yeah, but they don't know what's going on inside of me. I was on my way to getting clean, but I needed the money. And sure, I wasn't clean then, but they couldn't see that I was going through what I had to go through to get to the point where I was ready to make that decision. Lucy, have you seen a lot of people sober up in the time that you've been here? Have people change their lives? Have you seen people get better or worse?
No, I have seen a lot of people get sober. I can remember when we first opened the shelter 7 years ago, I would say that 90% of our folks were coming in drunk every night. And the last couple years, I would say the numbers have reversed. That we're seeing about 85% that are sober coming in every night, and we have a few that are coming in drunk, but the majority of them have really started changing their lives. And I think the drop-in center helps them during the day. We've got case managers that are really considerate
That's
to
a
their,
place where people can go during the day if they have
right,
nowhere to go, right? They don't
yep.
sleep there, though.
No, they don't sleep there.
Now, we have someone on the phone. I have to say, I had a little fun with this because they type in on this computer. We had to switch the computers out. And they tell me who it is and where they're from. And when it first started typing, they said he's from New Ha. And I thought, now that's a place I've never heard of, New Ha. I knew a few old Ha's, but I didn't know the New Ha. But actually, it's New Haven. We have David on the line. David, are you there? Do we have David? I don't know what's going on. We don't have David. Folks, I don't run this thing with the engineering here, so don't look at me. I always say, if anything goes wrong, everybody looks at me, but I don't push these buttons. So if we can get David on the air, that'd be nice. I can't hear David if he's there. Trouble, what's on your mind?
Well, like Lucy and everyone trying to tell you, they got a place to go at night, but in a storm, if it wasn't for Lucy, they don't have no place to go. Like Monday, the library was closed, the bus depot was closed, and these people had to stay outdoors in this cold. They don't have no place.
So that's why the drop-in center is important.
Right, it is. But a lot of these people won't go to it for some reason. They stay outdoors.
But they do go some. I mean, I've seen them in the bagel place. There's a bagel place here.
But
Listen, anybody listening in New York, I have to be honest. They call them bagels, but I'm a New Yorker. I don't want to be rude. I really like Brattleboro, but we got to tell the truth on this show. But I've seen them go in and you'll have a cup of coffee, and they're very sweet there. They let you people stay for a long time nursing a cup of coffee. Other places. Where else do people go?
I don't know. If the library or none of these places open, I don't know. They just walk around town just to stay warm.
Yeah, and everybody's got to understand out there. Vermont is not a place to be outdoors in the winter with
No,
nowhere
it
to
ain't.
go. That's just the way it is. Those numbers to call in again, 877-NOBODY-8. Anybody can call in, 877-NOBODY-8. And if you're homeless, afraid you're about to be homeless or formerly homeless, you can also call 866-LEFT-OUT. Nick, you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it's not the easiest thing, but it's nice. A drop-in center. I've been able to get mail there, which has been a real good help. They got coffee there, which is nice, and there's a different place every day here in Brattleboro to sit down and have a nice lunch. So I'd just like to say thanks to all the people that work hard to do that every day, because that's really nice break, and.
Thank you for saying that. And that's a very good point you make about the mail, because one of the things that happens when you're homeless is even if you apply for a job, there's no way for the potential employer to reach you. And your family, you want to reconnect with your family. Whatever happened that you were disconnected, you want them to have a place where they know how to get a hold of you. And that's an important function. So tell us, Lucy, about how the Brattleboro Drop-In Center helps with that kind of thing.
Well, they can receive their mail at the center. We also have a shower. We have laundry facilities for them. We also have a kitchen where a lot of the guys in the morning will make breakfast or they'll make themselves lunch. We got a clothing room. Today, Trouble was in there looking for a dress shirt. So we were hunting up a dress shirt for him. So you never know. I always tell my volunteers, I will never ask you to do a job that I wouldn't do myself. And last summer they laughed because I was out there unloading a truck with the guys. So I do, I do get my hands dirty. I do get down with the guys and do whatever I can help.
Very good. We have our caller back now, so let's go to David from New Ha. David, are you there? I still can't hear David. This is live radio, live TV too, folks. This is okay. I don't know what's going on with that, but we'll hope that this gets straightened out. And yes, we'll hope this gets straightened out because it's going to be a long night if it doesn't. So we will thank you for that. And I'm just looking at this board flashing, and I don't see any David. David, if you're listening, David, I apologize that we can't seem to bring you up on this board here. So tell me, Trouble, what are your personal prospects now for the future? Where do you think what are you trying to get together?
I'm trying to find another job because my boss died this week.
Mm.
And people that is 55 in their 50s, it's harder for them to find a job. They want the young, like me and Lucy. I always got to pick on her, bring her up. She can tell you, older you get, it's harder to find a job.
Yeah, sure, that's true. If what would I do? I'm older than that, and I'm not going to pick up a pick or a shovel and do that kind of thing because I'd be in the hospital in 2 seconds. I got a bad back. I'm getting old. So of course.
But they can't tell you can't have that job if you're willing to try it. But they do. They just won't hire you.
Yeah, age discrimination is against the law, but proving it is another
matter.
And if you're homeless, what are you going to do? Call up your $800 an hour lawyer? So there's just that's a toughie. That's a real problem. And I think too, is an interesting point. Since the Wall Street crash, there are fewer jobs in Brattleboro in particular. This is true all across the country, but the statistics are that there are fewer people employed in Brattleboro today than there were in 2007. More people on food stamps, more people on assistance, and there is a tendency in this country, we are going to blame homeless people for their own problem. They're all no good. They all did this. Well, just let me ask. Morningstar, do you work on Wall Street? Are you the one who was responsible for this crash?
No, but it's very interesting you should ask me that question.
Why?
May I elaborate for a minute?
Please.
Well, when I went to Nashville, I was told the key for me to be successful as a songwriter and a singer would be to learn sales. And they sent me to Florida to engage in sales. And I started selling commodities and currencies in boiler rooms. And I found out the key to me, this is not about someone's drug addiction. Homelessness to me is not about someone's drug addiction. There are many drug addicts that have finances and their lives are structured if they have trust funds.
That's right.
To me, I have watched our economy decimated. I learned working, selling Deutschmarks in a currency room, that when we put our money in the bank, the bankers make 500 to 1,000%, and they're loath to give us a 0.5%. Now, I've lived on Nantucket and watched fishermen, farmers, people like you and me loving and living in our island and being happy and being able to meet our taxes. And then we were discovered by Manhattan. And in 2 years, our real estate went from 60,000 to 600,000. Now the house that I built with my husband is worth between 12 and 16 million dollars, which is an artificially inflated price. This type of behavior has affected all the real estate all across the United States. Much of our real estate and mortgages are now owned as Asian investments.
Well, and you're not saying something that isn't in the news every day about the wealth being concentrated more and more at the top. But it's all the same. What has happened to our values?
Creates homelessness.
When that's right. But when this country was founded, everybody wasn't rich. There were some rich people, but a lot of people came for a place to have a hard work. That's always been the idea. You work, you get something. It shouldn't be taken away from you because somebody was speculating on Wall Street. So, I don't think I'm saying anything everybody doesn't know, but down here, you see it what the real consequence is. You know, it's not something in the papers when you're talking to people who have lost their jobs and have no prospect and there's no jobs out there. That's the reality. Nick, what is your plan for the future?
I have something to say kind of about the jobs. I did carpentry since I was 15 years old. I used to have people call me. I've walked on the jobs with my tool belt in hand and worked for 3 years for somebody after doing that. Nowadays, you go try to get a job, you got to fill out 300 sheets of paperwork, get 10 calls back, go to 2 different hospitals and take a UA. You know, things just aren't the way they used to be, and it's a lot harder to do anything now.
Tell people what a UA is.
It's a urinary analysis when they test you for drugs,
Right,
alcohol, or any of that stuff.
right. And so you can't just prove yourself on the job. You have to prove yourself before you even get it now.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which I did. I actually just got a job not too long ago,
good for
working
you.
locally, but it was hard. I don't have the luxury of going to the fridge in the morning and getting myself a lunch packed together and stuff, and then coming home and taking a nice shower when it's hard. It's hard to move forward right now.
By the way, Morningstar, when you were talking about working in a boiler room, for people who don't know the term, you don't mean a room where there was like an oil furnace. You mean
No, I mean a room where a scam. It was a scam, and unfortunately, I wouldn't figure this out for several weeks in until I was about to cut a big deal. Then my guts would start to flip, and I'd realize something was wrong, and I'd ask for proof, and there wouldn't be any. No, I was about to get my broker's license and work for Merrill Lynch as a broker. I like financial instruments, and I asked the man that owned Merrill Lynch in Boca Raton if it was a straight room. I said, I won't say anything. I'll just disappear, but I don't want to work in a room that isn't straight. And he told me nothing is straight anymore in any market. All of the markets have been corrupted. He said you have to have incredibly good instincts and good guts to be able to work in this kind of environment because there's so many crooks on the land.
well, I mean, again, you're not saying anything that's not on the news. The entire economy of the world just about collapsed because of these scams. And I am not the only American who is troubled that you get 3 DWIs and you're in prison. Now, I do not support driving drunk. I think that's a terrible thing to do, to be honest. But you go to prison for 3 DWIs for crashing the Western economy, putting millions of people out of work, and nearly destroying half the countries in the world. Nothing happens. And I think a lot of people feel frustrated about that. But what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Lucy, what kind of support do you get here from the community? Because, do people tell you, well, we don't care about homeless people? Or do you think that Brattleboro is a community where people do care and really, really try?
I am really surprised at how well we are supported by the community, both monetary donations as well as food donations. Like I said, every single night there's a different group that makes a meal in here and serves it and cleans up. And they're not just church groups. We have the United Way that does it. We have the Brattleboro Affordable Housing. So there are various groups that come in. We had the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts do a meal too. So it's really neat to see the kids interact with our homeless individuals. The guys and the ladies really enjoy having the kids around because a lot of them have lost contact with their children. So by having the youth in here doing these meals really gives them a lift.
Yeah, well, we should mention, by the way, that there's a dinner served here every night.
Right.
And that's a wonderful thing. So there are places to get food. You don't have to starve to death, although your choices are limited. It's not, if you have I've talked to people, if you're a diabetic, you have a special diet, it's difficult to take care of yourself with the free food that you can get. But thank God a lot of people at least will survive.
Well, I always tell my folks, my guys and ladies, that if you do have a special diet because of diabetes, let me know. Because it's very easy to call the churches up or whatever group is doing the meal that evening to say, hey, I've got a person who's got diabetes or a person who's got high blood pressure.
Good.
They can't have salt. They can't have this. So, and they're very thankful that I do make a phone call and let them know that we need special diets.
Oh, good. Well, that's not true everywhere, but good. It is just more difficult, especially if you're new in town and things like that. Trouble, here's a question. Probably no one has ever asked you this. If you ran the world, what would you do to end homelessness?
Well, just like this. you got to get the job situation back. And you got to bring the prices down. People out there making 25, 30 bucks an hour. Well, I can remember when I used to cut wood for $2 a cord
Mm-hmm.
and take care of horses. This job rate is so high and the rent is so high, you can't go to these places like around here, make $8.75. You got to have a fancy job where you can make 25 to 30 bucks an hour.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say to the people out there listening, you might be thinking out there, well, why ask homeless people what to do about homelessness? What do they know? Well, I'll tell you something. The people it's a waste of time talking to are the politicians. If they knew anything, we wouldn't have this problem. So let me, Morning Star, you raise your hand. What do you want to say about this?
Yes, well, there's a wonderful movement in Russia right now about the dasha, and that is pretty much community gardens. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing more and more of them in our country. But in Russia, they've taken a model of giving every person under a certain income a certain amount of land. It's called permafarming. And
Really?
it's what I recommend as a wonderful solution. There's a lot of land, and there are a lot of hardworking people in the state of Vermont. Specifically, I'm thinking of having lived in the Deep South and the West. I have to tell you, our country is full of hardworking, capable people who are suffering terribly these economic losses, and that would be a solution.
I think our country is full of wonderful people, period.
Hmm.
And as I have said on the air many times, we are having a failure of our leadership, not of our people. But what's happening on the land front, I mean, just as a matter of the news, is that since the crash, speculators have been buying up the apartments, buying up land, and your chances of actually getting into it now are much worse because these are people who are just looking to roll things over to make money. It's not anymore about we'll struggle, we'll buy a little farm. Now everything is going to be corporatized. And the unfortunate reality is that since the wealthy, whoever they were, corporations, speculators, whatever you want to call them, crashed the economy, it's empowered the people who created the problem, not the people who suffered from the problem. That's just the way it is. Well, Nick, what would you do? Let me ask you.
What to?
What's your solution to the problem of poverty in this country?
Oh wow. I would. I would think first off to help people with education that need it more, and to stop giving people money that claim to be disabled that are perfectly able to work and that are fine. It's a joke. I know people. I worked with a guy that had one hand and he was a one-handed roofer.
Oh.
He could have claimed disability, but he didn't. Some other guy's got a bad temper and he can't be around other people. It's a joke.
Yeah, but the other side of the coin is there's all kinds of people with real disabilities like Morningstar who can't get it. And what often happens is that people get thrown off capriciously, and then they have to fight to try and get back on when they've got it, and that is a cost-saving measure for the communities that throw people off, but the human cost is much greater than the financial savings. So I don't know how we fix that, but you raise a good question.
Misdirected funds.
Yeah. Those numbers to call in again, by the way, are 877 nobody, and then the number 877 nobody 8 or 866 left out. Morningstar, let me ask you this: you've alluded to the colorful life that you've had, and you have a son, you said. Where is your son? Why can't your son give you housing or help you in some way?
My son and my family my son and my family, I have many relatives in this area, and my son's in New York City, are very distressed with me that they behaved, that I acted in such a way to not husband my funds and assets, and that if I were willing to be more compliant with the government, I might get disability, which would mean, in my case, being put on different drugs and being put through surgery. So that there's no sympathy for me there. I have come to terms with that, and I would like to make a point now that I've been waiting for this evening to make. I know I've made several, but this is
Well, go
one.
ahead. Let's go
Okay,
for it.
this is about. I stayed in Memphis, in the city of Memphis, in Tennessee, with the sisters, Mother Teresa's sisters from Calcutta. When Mother Teresa was dying, Pope Paul had a special visit with her, and he told her, "You've done such tremendous work in in India. Where I want to continue your work after you're gone. The Catholic Church will put money. Where in the world is in the most trouble?" And she said, "The United States, Father. You must send my sisters to the United States." Now, the point I'm making is that we have a problem in America. We're used to plastering these nice smiles on our faces and behaving as if everything's all right. It might be because of the Depression or because we've been through so many wars, but it's a failure of recognition of the huge vastness of this problem. The fact that it has come into my family's home state, where everyone has been reliable and self-reliant for all my lifetime, and I'm 61, is just amazing to me. It shows me that the epidemic has spread to the point where, as I said, Mother Teresa recognized that there's a huge problem in our country. She has convents in almost every major city just to be there and just to accept people. And
You know, you remind me of a famous quote from Mahatma Gandhi. They asked him, what do you think of Western civilization? And he answered, it would be a good idea.
Thank you.
On the line, we have Anthony from Atlanta. Anthony, I hope I can hear you. Welcome to the Homelessness Marathon.
The homeless marathon, because everything you're saying is absolutely true. We need to change the concept of what people think is homelessness. You asked the public what we would do if we could do it. So I'd like to share my hairy, audacious goal. Is I realize that capitalism requires joblessness and homelessness, but co-ops seem to be the only source or choice now. And what we want to do is to build a system of domes with sub-level, when we have sub-levels in the dome. We live in the dome, we live in the sub-levels, and we lease out the dome to whatever corporate, team or whatever we use that dome for. What that would do is, like the Pentagon, it has only 5 stories above and 148 below. We could do as a public initiative, if the public really wants to end homelessness, we can begin to build these dome structures with sublevels and allow people to live and work in the subdomes and put pressure on the mayors of these cities to eminent domain blighted properties and use them for land grants to end homelessness.
Well, Anthony, I don't know if I obviously we don't have time to discuss the details. I don't know what I think of that idea, but what I do think is the point you raise is a good one. There's all kinds of alternative forms of housing. It doesn't have to be that you have to have an expensive house or an apartment. People have lived in lots of other ways, but most of them are not really possible in America because they're not permitted. Anthony?
Well, I think that's why think that's why we need to put the pressure on the legislators and the say-soers to make that available. I look at Ohio State, for example. Ohio State was a land grant college where a land grant was given. Well, we need a land grant, and there's plenty of eminent domain and different tools that leaders could use if they had the willpower. We just have to put some people in the place that have the willpower and protect them while they do it for us.
Anthony, we're running out of time, but I'm going to thank you for the call and for raising an important point, which is there are other forms of housing that are cheaper and easier to get people in. So I thank you for that. And by the way, I've heard the estimate we have 5 times as many abandoned apartments in buildings as we do homeless people. So refurbishing apartments is another thing. There's a lot of things. In this last minute, I want to say that I spent a night in this overflow shelter. I'd never been in a shelter. I was homeless, but I spent a year and a half couch surfing, which was quite traumatic in itself. But I found it, I thought the people in this shelter handled it very well. It's kind of very sad. I mean, it's very sad and desolate to think, how did I get here? And to think, what would it be in your life? And I'd like to go around and everybody to comment on that. How do you handle the emotions of being in a place where you're sleeping on the floor and you've pretty much got nothing, and yet you've got to keep your life going? Nick?
Honestly, I mainly think about my son. He's my motivation to keep me going, and I have a strong faith. I believe in God, and I turn to my Bible a lot to read when I'm really feeling down. And I try to remember that, there's better things ahead if I just keep pushing forward, and I do what I know is right. If I make right choices every day, I know my life's going to get better. That's all I do.
Thank you. Morningstar, how would you answer that? What keeps you going? Because this is tough. It's tough.
First of all, I feel so fortunate that I'm able. You have to be almost an Olympic athlete to survive the kind of stuff that I've survived. So, and that I see friends of mine that are homeless survive. That kind of adaptability. So I'm very grateful for that. When the pain or the disconnection, the distress that I pick up from the public, because I'm very concerned about the public. And I come from a family that has great pride in themselves and their work. So when people look at me cross-eyed and I get sad, I cry. And I tell you, crying releases endorphins, and I wipe my eyes and tell myself to get on with it.
Now, Lucy, you haven't actually slept in this shelter, I take it. But how do you see people coping with it? Or you did?
No, I have not. I have done plenty of second shifts. I've done a lot of first shifts also, but my favorite is the second shift. And
Which
I
is
had
what? What's the second
the
shift?
second shift is 1 a.m. to 7 a.m.
So you're like a guardian. People watch over people as they sleep.
It's true, and I do a lot of paperwork at that time because I get no interruptions. But I had an experience one night because like Nick, my faith is very deep, and I was here one night and I just heard this thing and I happened to look up, and it was almost like God was just watching over the people that night sleeping, and I felt that presence, and I have felt it more times. And I know that he's pleased with what we're doing in this community, and he's watching over my homeless family.
Thank you for that. And Trouble, we're almost out of time. How do you cope with the emotions of being down and out?
Well, I listen to other people trouble, and in the morning when Lucy come in, I tell her to put on a smile. I pick on people.
You
I,
make trouble. No wonder you have the
right,
name. Yeah.
there you go. That's how you live it.
Right. But it's true, you've got to have an upbeat attitude when you're down, or else you're going to go down for the count,
right.
basically. So you butt into other people's affairs, huh? That's how you do it. Well, why not? Why not? So what have we got? We got like a minute left, I guess, or two. So let's just go around one more time, and everybody just tell me some last thought you'd like to share with America.
Just everybody out there that's struggling, keep your heads up, and thanks everybody in Brattleboro that feeds us and helps out with our everyday needs.
And this is Morningstar. I'd like to say, go to sleep, you little hobos, and let the towns drift slowly by. Can't you hear the steel rails humming? That's a hobo's lullaby.
I just want to remind everybody that these folks are human beings. They have a story to tell everybody. Get to know a homeless person,
Right on.
listen to their story, and give them respect that you would like to receive.
Uh, there's a old song, walking in Charlie shoes. Just listen to the song and walk in someone else's shoes that are homeless. Then
Thank
you
you.
would know how I
We're out of
feel.
time, but Nick Morningstar, Lucy in Trouble, I want to thank you. We'll be back after a short break on the Homelessness Marathon.
You are listening to the Homelessness Marathon, produced in conjunction with Community Radio WVEW of Brattleboro, Vermont. The opinions expressed on this broadcast are not necessarily those of the producing or participating organizations or of the originating and affiliated radio stations. To see a live video of this broadcast, go to freespeech.org. Welcome to the 16th Annual Homelessness Marathon, a national dialogue on homelessness and poverty in America. The toll-free call-in numbers for this broadcast are 1-877-NOBODY-8. That's the word nobody followed by the number 8. Or if you're homeless, formerly homeless, or afraid you're about to be homeless, you may also call 1-866-LEFT-OUT.